We know that ALEC spouses, the spouses of ALEC legislators, do often go to these resorts. They stay in the hotel room that's often paid for by the ALEC scholarship. They're wined and dined along with their spouses at meals and dinners and ball games. And there is subsidized childcare for the children of lobbyists and legislators. There's a fee that's paid, but overall ALEC spends about $300,000 or more per year on child care services alone out of its $7 million budget, some of which come from the legislative lobbyists, but it's a pretty significant amount because you can see when you look at that what happens at ALEC resort meetings like the one coming up in Salt Lake City in July is that it's sort of a family vacation. And often it's a family vacation that these legislators could not afford on their salary to go off to a fancy resort, have the legislators' airfare paid by an ALEC scholarship fund, have the hotel taken care of, have all your meals taken care of, and be invited to the Diageo wine party, or be invited to the Reynolds tobacco cigar party and drink and smoke at length for free, and not come back and tell the people of Wisconsin that that's what happened. When you look at the ALEC legislation, and then we'll open up for questions, you can see a number of bills that really would have a shocking and devastating impact on Wisconsin families. Representative Zipper and Farrell introduced a bill that would basically bar Wisconsin families from being able to sue a drug manufacturer if the drug was approved by the FDA, with a narrower exception unless they could prove that there was some fraud in that approval. But you and I both know that every single year numerous drugs are recalled because they kill people, because they injure families. And what that bill would do, and that's not a bill that Wisconsin citizens are clamoring for, that's a bill that those legislators brought into the State House that's a model bill based on a model bill from out of state, from big pharma interests that may want to sell those drugs here, but don't want to have the liability if their products kill or injure Wisconsin families. I think that's wrong. The agenda that ALEC has put forward is an extreme agenda. It's not like NCSL. NCSL is actually a truly bipartisan organization in which the heads of the committees rotate from Republican and Democrat every year. They don't have an enormous substantive legislative agenda because they are a bipartisan enterprise. And there's no indication that, and what I believe is one of the most pernicious aspects of ALEC, there's no indication that NCSL actually has legislators vote as equals with corporate lobbyists behind closed doors. Zero evidence of that. But we know through ALEC's agenda, through the library that we've exposed in our project called ALEC Exposed, where we hope you'll go and look at the bills. We've marked them up. You can see them for yourself. Oftentimes, the Wisconsin legislators who are ALEC members don't even bother to change the name of the bill. If you simply put a name of a bill into our search engine, you'll pop out with probably a bill that has nearly identical provisions to the ALEC legislation being introduced in this state without any disclosure. But when you look at the agenda that ALEC has put forward, it's not a moderate, mainstream agenda that is something that I think Wisconsin can be proud of. It's an agenda to basically block minimum wage and living wage laws. It's an agenda to block sick leave pay for workers, for low-wage workers. In fact, ALEC is trying to turn Scott Walker's effort to preempt cities from having sick leave policies into the part of the national agenda for ALEC. ALEC's agenda includes numerous endorsements of trade bills that ship Wisconsin jobs overseas. ALEC's agenda includes numerous ways to choke the ability of this government to raise revenue, to serve the needs of Wisconsin citizens, including a bill that was introduced this past year to require a supermajority in the future to raise taxes in the state, which really allows a future minority to block the majority will to provide needed services for Wisconsin citizens. This agenda is extreme, and this extreme agenda represents the hijacking of Wisconsin by these out-of-state interests. And so we're open for questions.
I talked to an attorney that represents ALEC a few weeks ago. He said by the strictest IRS definition, they're not a lobbying group. Do you have an attorney, or do you guys know that for sure the IRS definition of lobbying is different than what the definition of lobbying is in Wisconsin?
Well, I'll tell you that the federal definition of lobbying is quite clear, and it is about influencing the introduction or passage of legislation. It's a very straightforward definition of lobbying. I've operated under it for a number of years. There's no way to read that definition and believe that what ALEC is doing constitutes zero lobbying. We have documents from our open records request in this state that show them asking for bills to be introduced. If that's not lobbying, I don't know what it is. Asking for them to push this bill in a particular way, if that's not lobbying, I don't know what it is. And the fact is that Common Cause filed not just an extraordinarily compelling complaint brought by one of the top tax lawyers and key TAM lawyers in the nation. They filed 47 pounds of documents from FOIAs and whistleblower information with the IRS, documenting over and over and over again what ALEC does. As someone who's been a lobbyist, I'll say I know lobbying when I see it, and this is definitely lobbying. And we'll be happy to provide you with some of the open records requests. We're still going through the thousands of pages that we've received, but certainly on the effort to roll back the national healthcare reforms, the ACA, there are direct emails from ALEC asking for these bills to be introduced, and we'll provide those. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. We've documented in this state and other states numerous emails going to legislators asking for bills to be introduced.
Lisa, on the scholarships, I just want to make sure I understand. You said corporate lobbyists here in the Capitol are making contributions to ALEC.
Here in the Capitol, meaning on the square.
Right. Yeah, right. Yeah, all right. Not right.
So what we have is a document from an open records request out of Scott Fitzgerald's office that shows the money coming in from a lobbyist, a company that lobbies here in Wisconsin. We've got examples in the report. $1,000, $500 in this at the beginning of the year. And that money actually is transmitted, in essence, to a separate account that ALEC maintains. And then we see on that debit sheet, that debit and credit sheet, money going out to reimburse travel for Wisconsin legislators. So I don't know where they send their checks. We do know in one instance, with respect to pharma, an issue that we notified the GAB of earlier this year, that pharma, the trade group for the pharmaceutical industry, was asked to send over $350,000, a check for over $350,000 to a Wisconsin address for the ALEC Scholarship Fund. It went to the address of Amy Boyer's office. ALEC has said that only less than $4,000 or $5,000 of that was meant for Wisconsin. The rest was meant for other states. So I don't know how they transmit the check from Washington, D.C. pharma down the street from ALEC headquarters to Wisconsin, to the lobbyist here, the state private sector co-chair for Wisconsin, and the money goes back into an account that's held by ALEC, and then the money is distributed to ALEC legislators. But here's what we do know. ALEC's lawyers told GAB 2 years ago that it had nothing, that ALEC, that these scholarships were okay because they were all handled by headquarters, and that Wisconsin legislators had nothing to do with them, raising the money or the designation of the money. We know that that same year in 2010, ALEC provided a signed tax report to the IRS in which it said it engaged in 0 scholarships and would not report the amount of revenue or expenses of the scholarship fund because it said it had nothing to do with it. That was merely administered by the states and that they weren't responsible for reporting to the IRS about it. This is a stunning set of 2 different stories told to 2 different regulatory agencies that tell entirely the opposite story. What the open records request story tells is that Scott Fitzgerald was informed fully about the money coming in from Wisconsin corporations that have business before this state and knew precisely which legislators were getting those scholarships. In fact, under ALEC's bylaws, the state leaders of ALEC are the ones who designate which legislators get the reward of the subsidized trip to the ALEC resort meetings. Well, I would say, I guess, 2 things in response. The first is that it's quite clear that in Wisconsin and other states, we know from other FOIAs that the legislative leaders do know who's giving the money. So the leaders of the state caucus know who's giving the money, and we know that some of those corporations asked for dinners and meetings with those legislators after giving the checks. We've documented that fully in Ohio. We haven't finished reviewing all the documents in Wisconsin. And as I said, we haven't received a single responsive request from Representative Souter's office. But we know that, pardon me, we know that some ALEC legislators do know which corporations are giving money for the scholarship fund. And we also know that when you go to those ALEC conventions, as Mark Copan has attested, you're bombarded with basically a NASCAR-like operation with corporate logos for this dinner and that dinner. We have photographic evidence of the sponsorship of these events, the Time Warner baseball game, the Diageo wine party, the Reynolds tobacco party. So those are also gifts where the corporate name is known and notorious. In fact, the corporations pay a fee to have their name widely known by the legislators. With respect to the idea that if the legislator doesn't know, it doesn't count somehow, I would say I certainly can't put money in an account at M&I Bank and have Representative Voss or Representative Souter then distribute that money to whoever they want for travel and say it's okay because they didn't know it was me. You know, it's an absurd construction of state ethics law. It's basically laundering. And in fact, one of the ironies is we had a legislator who wanted to go to the ALEC conference in order to, from another state, in order to see what they were doing, and I couldn't pay for that legislator to go because my organization, a 501c3, just like ALEC, a 501c3, cannot give a gift to a legislator to cover their travel. And when that legislator goes and wants reimbursement through their campaign fund, I, as a 501c3, can't reimburse their campaign fund because it's their political campaign fund. And yet this is precisely what ALEC does through these scholarships.
What confidence do you have that Attorney General Van Hollen will take this seriously?
I'll turn to Jay for that.
Well, you know, here's the thing. When I moved to Wisconsin in 1988, the big scandal at that time was the fact that 5 legislators had received a ticket to a Packers game, and several had received a train ride, I think from Milwaukee to wherever trains were going at that time, not now. But that was front page news in Wisconsin. And it was because of this arcane, very folksy, down-to-earth law that we have that can provide nothing to value the legislators. So what I don't understand is how the Attorney General would be able to say, to look at these scholarships that are provided to legislators, to be able to travel to places like New Orleans, Phoenix. I mean, they're never places like, you know, Kenosha or, you know, Wausau. I mean, they're always usually pretty nice places. So how is it?
We've been Kenosha and Wausau here.
And I love those places, but I mean, that's not where you're going to go for an ALEC conference. So I think on its face, it would be worthwhile for the Attorney General just to investigate how it is that that ALEC is able to provide these services. And secondly, if he is able to get the information, and this report and others hopefully will be able to provide at least some of it for him, to be able to see that ALEC has not lobbied for specific pieces of legislation, and how they are then able to escape having to be a 501c4 lobbying organization, then I think he's not paying proper attention to what he needs to be doing. And I might just say about the tax status, I mean, the exempt from tax status. An organization like mine, Common Cause, in Wisconsin, we lobby, so we're a C4. Now, we also do receive some foundation money for education purposes, and so we have a separate fund. It's called a C3 fund. But none of the money that I use from the C3 fund can be used for a lobbying purpose. Now, if ALEC's lobbying, they haven't even gone through setting up a separate lobbying organization in order to expend funds to influence legislators. They're claiming that they don't lobby. They're claiming that all of their money should be tax exempt because they're not a lobbying organization. And this report and all the evidence suggests that's not the case. So I would just hope that the Attorney General would look at the evidence that's presented to him and make a judgment about whether or not this is something that ought to be investigated.
And I would add, I certainly hope that Attorney General Van Hollen would rise above his partisan roots and serve his role as the chief law enforcement officer for the state of Wisconsin and investigate the evidence that we're providing. We think it's significant evidence, and the evidence that Common Cause has put before the IRS is substantial. And we also have a number of other examples of where ALEC talks about these bills. ALEC lives primarily to produce these bills, to get these bills introduced and enacted. And the bulk of its work at its task force meetings are all about these bills. That's what it does. It produces, it has ALEC corporations and sometimes legislators bring bills to these meetings to be ratified as templates for the nation and to be put forward. And ALEC routinely produces scorecards, which is mostly done by legislative organizations, but not exclusively, about how well they're doing. They extensively track the bills, and they send information to legislators to try to stop other bills from being introduced. I think we have a strong case on this, and we even have some of the ALEC representatives on video talking about, quote, lobbying for liberty. They have said that they've lobbied, although they told the IRS that they do no lobbying, and they've told Wisconsin, in essence, they do no lobbying. We strongly disagree.
The suitor stuff that you're talking about, have you made a formal FOIA for that information, or was this just a request?
We filed a formal open records request under the state statutes. Brennan actually filed it, and he's giving a picture right now. Brendan Fisher filed that request, and he responded that he had no responsive emails in either his official state email or any other email account, even though he is the Wisconsin legislative leader, co-leader for the state for the past 12 to 16 months since Fitzgerald stepped aside and Hitch went over to the Department of Administration. Yes?
Do you have any numbers on per year averages that legislators are getting in scholarships?
We don't have that averaged out, but we do have the documents that show the scholarships coming, the money coming into Wisconsin for legislators and going to Wisconsin legislators in the years 2006, 2007, 2008, and most of 2010. We don't have part of 2011, and we don't have 2011 and 2012, but we do have numbers that you can see the actual payments being made to Wisconsin legislators. I think we do have some of that documented in the report. Sorry, in the back of the report, we have actually in the middle of the report. I won't have the page, but there's a page basically where we go through member by member and talk about how much they received in ALEC scholarship funds. So, for example, Scott Fitzgerald, he was the state co-chair in 2010 and 2011. He was actually the co-chair earlier in Wisconsin history, and he was also on the controversial public safety and elections task force. He has received over 3,800 in 2006, 2,000 in 2007, 1,000 in 2008. Now, Fitzgerald has reported some of this. Actually, he's one of the only ones who's reported it. He's reported it as honoraria, as opposed to scholarships. Other legislators have reported. Other legislators, such as Alea Wukmir, have reported receiving scholarships. She received 2,400 approximately in 2008 and 2,000 in 2009 and 2010. And she introduced over 10 ALEC bills. You also have a situation with Alberta Darling, who we have no information about scholarships for her, but she introduced 14 ALEC bills, or ALEC-related bills. So there is detailed information in here about the particular task forces that ALEC members are on. It's quite extensive, as well as the scholarships that they've received. One of the charts in here gives you an actual summary for 2008, so you can see the money coming in from Eli Lilly, from Xcel Energy, from Wisconsin Cable Communications, Miller Brewing Company, and others. And you can see the money going out to legislators like Frank Blassie, to Leah Wukmir, and others. So that information is documented in here. Because the spotlight has been shining on ALEC in the past year with our project, as well as with the increased media attention following the terrible tragedy of Trayvon Martin's shooting in Florida and the invocation of this Castle Doctrine Standard Ground Law as a basis for preventing even a full investigation and indictment in that case previously, ALEC has been receiving increased scrutiny, and in the wake of increased scrutiny over its efforts to push the Castle Doctrine bill across the country, including Wisconsin, where it was adopted in part, the voter ID legislation, which was adopted here in Wisconsin as well, which tracks and resembles the ALEC voter ID bill. In response to that increased national spotlight, over a dozen ALEC corporations have left, including Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Procter & Gamble, and others. and over 40, actually 45 legislators, Republicans and Democrats in other states than Wisconsin have left ALEC and resigned their membership. Yes?
Have you seen any link between campaign financing and spending going up through regular channels after ALEC-sponsored legislation has been passed by legislators?
I don't think we've tracked it in a temporal way like that. We do show that it is the fact the case that some of these corporations that have business before the state are giving money to these legislators for their campaign funds, and they're also pushing forward the ALEC bills. What we do know in a particular instance is that in the case of Time Warner, not in this legislative cycle, but in a previous legislative cycle, they had a bill before the Wisconsin legislature they were very interested in. They sponsored at the ALEC convention in Cincinnati in the spring of in the spring of 2011, right? They had the ball game, the Major League Baseball game, and then the legislators here in Wisconsin and other states went back and supported the Time Warner pushed bill on cable issues. And Brendan is telling you that I'm correct on that, right? Yes.
Yeah, I just want to say something in defense of Wisconsin legislators with regard to model legislation. They did take the voter photo ID bill, which was an ALEC model, but they deemed that it wasn't restrictive or extreme enough. So in Wisconsin, it was changed.
On the Castle doctrine,
Yes.
Is there any sort of connection that you're aware of? For example, is the NRA a member of ALEC? Talk about that.
Yes, so this is a bill that the Center for Media Democracy has documented extensively. We were the ones that helped break this story nationally. The original Castle Doctrine was conceived of by the NRA's lobbyist, Marion Hammer, in Florida. She's the former NRA president. In 2004, she thought this would be a great bill to move forward. She approached 2 ALEC legislators in Florida in 2005, in the Senate and the House down there. They introduced that bill. It was passed by the Florida legislature and signed into law by Jeb Bush. Then that lobbyist, Marion Hammer, traveled to an ALEC convention in Texas in 2005 in the summer. She introduced that bill and proposed it as an ALEC model. That particular task force, which was then known as the Criminal Justice Task Force, was co-chaired by Walmart, the largest seller of ammunition in the United States and indeed the world in a retail sense, and the largest seller of long guns in the United States. Marion Hammer reported back to the NRA at the time that that bill was well received and unanimously approved by ALEC's task force, which means it was approved by the public sector and private sector members, its corporate lobbyists and special interest groups as well as the legislators. That was the summer of 2005. Since that time, that bill has sped across the country in various forms. Some states have adopted it in whole. States like Wisconsin have taken 2 of the 3 parts of that bill. We know that the NRA is a longtime member of that task force. It actually then subsequently co-chaired that task force in 2008 and 2009 for ALEC. The NRA has also put forward a number of ALEC bills over the years, including expanding concealed carry, which is one of the bills that was introduced here in Wisconsin. We recently issued a report this week that I wrote that extensively details the NRA's involvement in ALEC over the past 20 years, as well as Coke Industries' involvement in ALEC in that same time frame. And so you can see bill after bill after bill that was put forward. One of the bills that was just pushed within ALEC this last winter was a bill to change the bar on cities having their own gun laws and cities suing manufacturers of guns and other weapons. It was a bill to change that, an amendment to change that by the NRA so that cities couldn't ban machine guns and couldn't ban cop killer bullets or any ammunition, basically. That bill is an ALEC model bill. So the NRA is extensively involved in ALEC. Now, ALEC has said last month that it was disbanding this particular task force due to the controversy. The former chair of that task force, Jerry Madden, a representative from Texas, told one of the local reporters that it wasn't really disbanded, the work would continue in other ways. Are there other questions? We do have bill side-by-sides for you if there are some that you are particularly interested in looking at. And we do have the extensive library of resources about ALEC at ALEC Exposed. That includes detailed information on ALEC's funding, comparisons to the National Conference of State Legislatures and others, details about all the corporations and politicians that are involved in ALEC, the ALEC leaders, as well as information about ALEC think tanks. We do have a detailed section in here talking about some of the allies of ALEC in the state, including the McIver Institute, and the Bradley Foundation, and Americans for Prosperity in Wisconsin. And so AFP is active in ALEC. The Koch brothers, Koch Industries, are both represented on ALEC's board and through organizations that they fund that are part of ALEC, like the Cato Institute, as well as Americans for Prosperity, which, as you know, has been very active in this state. And so there's more information about those entities as well at the end of this report. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.